A warm welcome to this short presentation on delivering activities in the early years. I'm Sammy and I'm going to walk you through my key messages that support delivering activities in the early years. And when I say early years, I'm talking about children 0 to around 4 years old who would be attending daycare or nursery. Okay. And our focus today is balancing adult intentions, so your reasoning for doing activities, creating that balance with children's creativity. How do you balance those two things? And I'm not going to address that directly, but I'm going to talk around my advice and guidance, which should sum up to supporting how adults balance their intentions, their reasons for doing activities with supporting children's creativity and exploration. Okay, so our key objectives for this presentation is I want us to understand and recognize the importance of child-centered approaches, to talk a little bit about ways to maintain children's engagement and attention while they're engaged in adult-led activities. And primarily we are looking at adult-led activities. Techniques, things we can do to support and encourage children's creativity, strategies for incorporating children's ideas into planned activities. And I want to warn you of the trap of over-controlling activities for children, and just thinking about how we can adapt plans based on children's responses to what you're delivering. So first and foremost, my biggest advice is when you are delivering adult-led activities, whether that's group activity, whole group activity, something like circle time, whether it's whole class teaching, whether it's small groups, one-to-one activities, is to have a plan. Have an activity plan that highlights your target group, so your age group, etc., what the name of the activity is, what type of development it supports. On your plan, have a clearly articulated learning intention. Specify in advance what resources and what preparation you need to do. And then think carefully in your plan about how you will introduce the activity, what your main steps of the activity are, and what the conclusion, how you will draw together everything you've done in the activity. And an activity may be 10 minutes or it may be 30 minutes. But my recommendation is when you are doing an adult-led activity, you have a plan. Having a plan helps you be more intentional in what you're doing, in your approach. And within the plan, I would also recommend that you identify key vocabulary, language, questions that you want to use. You also think about how you're going to differentiate that activity, so to provide more support to those that need it, or more stretch and challenge to those that need it, bearing in mind that every child is different and every child will need different things from the activity. How do you support those differences? And just think about what the adult's role is. Is the adult's role in the activity to stand back, to observe? Is it to facilitate? Is it to scaffold? So we're going to have a look at some of those things here, but those are the kinds of things that you should be capturing in a plan before you set out to do an activity, okay? And I just want to reinforce some key points about delivering activities in the early years. So consider, first of all, your approach. Is it adult-led? Is it adult initiated? So where you've set up provocations in such a way that the children will come in and interact with that? Is it independent? Is it a set time activity? Or is it an open-ended activity where children can flow in and flow out? How will you differentiate and make the activity appropriate to all the children who will access and engage with that activity? What language will you use? What vocabulary will you focus on? How will you emphasize that vocabulary? And what is your role? How will you scaffold or support the activity? I know I already said those things, but they are so important that I am just putting them up here on a reminder slide, okay? And you must have a clear learning intention. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Okay, so now we're going to jump into some practical help and advice. This is just my guidance from my many years of working in early years of how I can help and support you when you're delivering adult-led activities. So first of all, I would say preparation is key. If you're doing an activity with a whole group, say for example circle time, you sit the children down for circle time, or small group time where you've got a group of 5 children, you sit the children down and you're not prepared, that is the recipe for disaster. What you need to do is you need to gather your things, prepare everything that you will need before you sit the children down, before you gather the children. Have everything set out in the way that you want it for that activity, and then bring the children in, then sit the children down. So understanding what your activity is about, why the children are doing the activity, and what should be achieved. That's coming back to your learning intention and really being focused when you prepare about why you're doing it, so that when you deliver that activity, those are the things that you're focusing on. Obviously that means having a plan in advance. I've already said gathering all of the resources together and setting up the room, the space, the table, the outside area, the designated zone that you will be doing your activity in should be set up and ready. Okay, I would also recommend considering ground rules. Ground rules will be different for every activity that you do. Ground rules should be very, very simple and very specific to the activity you're doing. So obviously things like no hitting, no punching, walking inside, those kind of things are not relevant. Anyway, they're not relevant because, you know, we wouldn't say those things. You should couch everything in terms of what you want children to do, not what you don't want them to do. And all your rules anyway should be positive. But that aside, they're not general rules. When I'm talking about ground rules for an activity, they will be very specific for whatever activity that you're doing. So if, for example, it's a story time activity, you would reinforce your ground rules at the beginning of that story time to remind everyone, while I'm reading the story, everybody stays on their bottoms, sitting down, and I want you listening with your listening ears and your listening eyes. Those are our rules for story time, that we stay on our bottoms, facing forwards and listening with our ears and watching with our eyes. Now, whatever the activity is, there will be a few simple rules, turn after turn, if it's a obstacle course outside, for example. But if you set your expectations very, very clearly at the beginning of the activity and reinforce those expectations as you move through the activity, that will help you maintain control of what you're doing and be able to deliver your objectives in a meaningful way without struggling with behavior management. I would also say that rules can be in place for any age group. Even if you're working with babies and you're doing a sensory play, your rule can be we play on the tray rather than obviously putting things in our mouths. So it would be, oh, let's keep the leaves on the tray, let's play with the leaves on the tray. You set it out at the beginning and you revisit and revise and reinforce those ground rules as you go through the activity. So as it says on my slide, these ground rules, whatever they are, should be clearly communicated before and during the activity. So what could ground rules look like for cooking, for example, for painting, for bingo, for smelling, for obstacle course, for yoga, or for crazy animal dancing? Obviously, your ground rules for each of those activities are going to look and feel different depending on what you're doing. So it's important that you consider that before you start the activity. And also, the more you do an activity, the more you lead an adult-led painting activity, you will start to know in advance what are the important things that you can crystallize in the rules. So for example, if you have a setting where children wear aprons, you can lay out an apron on each chair, and you can remind the children that one of the rules is that we put an apron on before we start painting. When we're finished, we take the apron off and we leave it on the chair, and we wash our hands and we wash our face. For example, those might be some of the ground rules that you have, for painting, and for each thing that's going to look different. But be clear about what your rules are for your activity, and find a way to constantly reinforce and remind the children about what they are. That will mean your activity runs much more smoothly. Okay. Whoops. So I just missed a slide and I can't work out how to go back to it, so I'll tell you what was on there. That was about active engagement. It was about if a child's bum is numb, then so is their head. Okay, one of the things that happens way too often, in my opinion, with adult-led activities is that you're asking children to sit down for too long and to focus for too long. And what you need to be doing is short time of focus, and then something active, moving, meaningful, making meaning, exploring, and then short time to focus again where there's a high level of concentration, then explore. And I think that sometimes adults who are leading children's activities have a hard time in holding the children and just letting them go. They stay with the explanation too long. They want to hold them together as a group. Sometimes it's because of an unconscious fear of when you then leave the children that everything could end up in chaos, which, if you manage it, you have your rules and regulations in place, you remind the children of expected behavior, that shouldn't happen. And you should allow plenty of time for children to explore whatever activity you're doing in their own way, at their own pace, using the materials in interesting and meaningful ways. So every activity that you do in early years, we're talking 0 to 4 years old, should have a high level of activity where they have the opportunity to move their bodies, be kinesthetic in their learning. That is really important. Okay, now we come on to this slide, which is the slide that I do want to tell you about also, which is about no waiting. Okay, what I really would urge you to do is, when you are planning activities for children in the early years, is to look at your activity in advance, and anytime children have to wait, think of an alternative, think of something else. Generally, we're not teaching turn-taking skills. That would not be one of our learning objectives of delivering a certain activity, would be to teach turn-taking skills. If, for example, we're doing a cooking activity, I cannot stand it when in a cooking activity there is one bowl, 6 children, and everyone has to wait for their turn to mix. This is not the way to deliver a cooking activity in the early years. What should be happening is everyone should have a bowl. They should be working independently, and there should be enough spoons, wooden spoons and bowls and ingredients for everyone. It shouldn't be about waiting for 6 other people to have had a turn until you can mix for a minute, or not even a minute. So active engagement, whatever your activity is, all the time. And if you've got an activity that requires any degree of waiting, look at it, revise it, and think about how you can change it to make sure that there is active participation all the time. There will be things that you can do to support active participation. Okay, this is my message to you. Power is an illusion. Relinquish the control of the children and the world will be yours. Give the instruction and then let them do it. Let them get stuck in. Give them the space to be creative with the materials or resources or activity that you've set out. Okay? Holding on to the power, holding on to the control in any activity is an illusion. As long as you've got the right framework and the right boundaries in place, when you relinquish control and give the activity to the children to take full part in, whether it's a card game, whether it's a matching game, whether it's a sensory activity, the more they can get stuck in and take full part in it, the more meaningful that activity will be for them. So don't be afraid of letting go and letting them get stuck into it. One of the things that I see way too often, especially with art projects and cooking projects, is practitioners in the early years, when they're doing an art activity with children or a cooking activity, there is way too much emphasis placed on the product rather than the process of creativity. So whenever you're doing an activity with children, it is always process over product. And you see my little infographic there, the process is over the product. So process is the creative experience. So if your activity is making Happy New Year cards for their families, okay, you have to know and understand that the creative process of them making those New Year cards is what's important, not what the New Year card looks like at the end. And some early years practitioners have this obsession that there has to be something nice for them to take home for their families at the end of the day. Well, that's not necessarily, the case. So you may have pre-folded cards if you're making New Year's cards, and lots of art and interesting materials that they can stick on. You might have pre-cut greetings depending on their age and stage of literacy, that they can find a greeting and stick it in their card, but that's okay if it's stuck upside down, back to front, on the side, because it's their work, it's something they created. If you are too prescriptive and you tell them, cut out the reindeer ears and put the reindeer ears here, and this is where you have to stick that, this is not a creative activity. This is not a meaningful activity for children. They have to be involved in the creation process. It's the same with cooking. It doesn't matter how the cookies come out. First of all, they'll eat the cookies anyway, because children always eat their cooking. But if it's too runny, you can gently suggest, oh, that's a very runny mixture. What about adding some more flour? That will make the dough firmer. No, you don't want to? Okay, well, we'll try and cook it like this and we'll see how it comes out. That is the learning process for children. Don't take that away from them by trying to control what they're doing too much. It's process over product. This is how children learn. Don't control their product. Okay, I probably already said this 100 times. Let the children explore. Let them experiment. Support experimentation. Support them trying this, trying that. Use your questioning skills, use your scaffolding skills to support, guide and help, but allow the children to take control. Allow them to explore, to investigate and to get messy, and don't be afraid of that. One of the things when you're delivering an adult-led activity, especially if it's in the group, is trying to balance the needs of the group with the needs of the individual. And it comes back to what I was saying before about no waiting. As well as supporting and guiding a group process, you also have to make sure that every single individual that is in your activity, whether it's an activity for 4 children or whether it's an activity for 14 children, it is your role and your job as an early years practitioner to make sure that they are engaged throughout that entire activity time, that they are doing stuff, that there are things going on for them, that they have things they can hold, that they can do, that they can actively engage in. So yes, it is absolutely a critical balancing exercise to balance the needs of the individual with the needs of the group. That's really important to do. Thinking about your role in in the activity is really important. And I would say a big part of your role, once you've given instructions, once you've set the boundaries, you're reminding them of the rules, is to facilitate, is to support, is to guide, not control, not direct, etc. It's to guide and support, and really to facilitate the activity. So as I said, to guide, I've got some other slides here. You also need to be looking at, observing, understanding their participation as they're moving through the activity, and make sure that what you're doing is providing extend and challenge for those that need it. So if the activity is too easy, too boring, as you're in the moment, as you're going through the things, how can you support, challenge, make it a bit more challenging, a bit harder, build in something that holds their attention, moves them to the next step, and maintains them in their zone of proximal development rather than leaves them in their zone of actual development. How can you push them and move their learning forward? And that might be different for different children in the group. You also need to think about how you can support the children, and you might identify in action while you're delivering the activity that there are some children that will ultimately need more support to achieve the learning aims than other children. So how do you do that? How do you recognize that in the moment and turn your attention to supporting those children that will need your support? Remember, not doing something for the children, not taking over for them, but providing the support that they need to have a go at the activity and try it out for themselves. So we're coming to the end. Here is my conclusion. These are the things that I want to just remind you of. Prepare the activity in advance. Allow and encourage creative freedom while you're moving through the activity with the children. Always, always process over product. It's the taking part, it's the engagement, it's the learning, it's the experimenting. It's not how nice the cake looks or how great the New Year card is at the end. It's the engagement and participation that is important. That is where the learning happens. Use all the time available. Don't rush to pack away. So for example, if you have an hour out for painting activity where children can flow in and flow out from that, have that activity out for the entire hour so children can take their time, so they can spend as long as they want at that station, so they can leave the station and if they want to return to the station within the parameters of the activity timing. Think about your use of space as well. When you're delivering an activity, think about where is the best place to deliver it. Is it on the floor? Is it on a carpet? Is it inside? Is it outside? Is it at a table? Is it by putting the table on the side? Is it inside a tent? Is it inside a specially made a project space that you've created for this activity? Where will be the most productive place for that activity to take place? And pace the activity as you go. So you introduce new and exciting bits all the way through the activity. This will help you. When you pace the activity, this will help you hold the children's attention. Okay? All that's left to do is for me to say thank you very much. I hope some of what I've said is useful and you will be able to apply that when you are delivering adult-led activities with children and young people.